It's really very simple. I will not drive on Highway 88 again. No matter the pay, no matter the reason, I am never going back. Period. Now, if you want to know why I'm not going back, then I'm happy to tell you. You might not believe me, and some of you will no doubt think I'm crazy, but some of you will believe me, and hopefully once you've heard me out, you too will avoid using that stretch of road. After all, some folks no longer have the choice. I had driven down that road, the stretch people call Highway 88, hundreds, if not thousands of times. I actually joked with friends that if I had $1 for every time I had passed the 2 white trees and the abandoned car, I would have enough money never to drive past them again. As it turned out, I didn't need the money. I won't be driving past them anyway. As a long-distance truck driver, I used to go wherever the client asked me to go, and since Highway 88 was the access point for the major interstates, I had to drive down it virtually every day, no matter which direction I was headed. In the past, I used to use the famous landmarks as markers for the start and end of a journey. The 2 white trees, as people called them, were a pair of silver birch, what my old mother used to call ghost trees, that had bright white-coloured bark that looked even brighter in the headlights when you were driving back late in the evening. Between those 2 trees many years ago, someone had parked an old Volkswagen Beetle and left it there to rot. Over the years, ivy, grass and all manner of other plants had made their homes in and around the car so that it literally sprouted out of the cavity where the engine used to be and out of the sunroof. The passenger seats and driver's side were completely filled with green, and sometimes in the summer the entire roof would be covered with wildflowers, so that the scene was actually quite pretty in the daytime. At night, it was a little different. Then the 2 trees, standing like 2 ghostly sentinels beside the car, looked like mourners bent over a car covered in flowers left by the side of the road to show where someone who had been hit and killed, or where a horrible crash had occurred. I'll be honest and say that for some other drivers the scene was creepy, long before what happened to me and I had heard them talk about it. Back then though, I took no notice. For me, that little scene at the start of Highway 88 was like the point where I clocked in and clocked out every morning and night. I passed it on my way out on a trip and came back to it on my way home. That is, until that one night 2 years ago. Usually when I passed the white trees and the car going onto Highway 88, it was in the morning because I was headed out on a job. That night though, I was to go much further than my usual shift, and so was forced to set off many hours earlier, basically in the early hours of the morning that should really be considered part of the night before. I remember thinking it would be quite novel to pass this little landmark at night. Whilst I was used to passing it going in the other direction, this was going to be something new. As it turned out, there was something new, literally at the landmark. As I drove toward the white trees and the abandoned car that rested between them, I saw a figure standing there. It appeared to be a woman, clearly of very advanced years. She had lank, silver hair that hung down over her shoulders and was wearing a long, pale dress, a little like a nightgown. She was also holding a sign to show that she was hitchhiking. Now, to me, hitchhiking had always been the kind of thing done by the young, not something I expected to see an old woman doing. But I was on a job, heading hundreds of miles away, and was forbidden strictly by the company to pick up anyone whilst doing these journeys. Even though part of me worried a little about the old girl standing there, I figured she was visible enough, and that someone else would come along to pick her up soon. So, instead of stopping, I drove onto Highway 88 and zoomed past the 2 white trees, the wrecked-out car and the strange old woman. Having sped along for about 5 minutes, I drove onto Highway 88 and zoomed past the 2 white trees, the wrecked-out car and the strange old woman. Now you think I made a mistake, that I just repeated the exact same words twice, right? Well, I did, but only because that is exactly what happened. I drove onto Highway 88, zoomed past the 2 white trees, the wrecked-out car and the strange old woman and drove for 5 minutes. Then I did it again, and again, and again. Now this is the point where people think I'm insane. How could you pass the same person and the same point over and over, unless you just went round in circles? Thing is, I didn't go around in circles. I drove straight, past the trees, the car and the woman along the darkened road for another 5 minutes, panic like sharpened claws gripping my chest and throat, until suddenly I was back. Back at that same point at the start of the highway, looking again at the trees and the car, and the blurry figure of that strange old woman. People have asked me where the cutoff was, whether there was some kind of white flash or a sudden jump between each repetition, but there wasn't. As far as I could tell, it was the same continuous stream of events. The road 5 minutes from the trees simply blended back into the start of the highway as if it always led there, as if it somehow was both after and before this point, in a big circular and never-ending loop. I brought the cab to a halt, stopped dead in the center of the highway, unconcerned about any other vehicle that might come from behind. I tried the door of the cab, attempting to get out of the truck and down onto the tarmac, to sprint away into the fields on either side and escape what I thought was happening. But the door wouldn't give. Instead, it remained firmly shut, as if welded in place. I tried the window, thinking perhaps I could roll it down and squeeze out, but that too was sealed in place. I even tried smashing it, swinging over and over at the glass with my aluminum coffee mug and then with my bare fists. It wouldn't budge. I was trapped inside. That perhaps this wasn't really happening, and I was in fact at home asleep. I pinched myself and bit down on the inside of my cheek. A sharp stab of pain confirmed that this was no dream. Panicked and with ideas swirling in my head, I did what most people would do in this situation. If I couldn't get out and run, I'd run in the truck. Slamming my foot down on the accelerator, I sped, faster and faster, hurtling toward the point where things blurred back onto themselves into the wall of black before me, and emerged once again before the trees, the car and the woman, all of whom flashed by me in streaking blur like a long smudge of white. I slammed on the brakes and brought the truck to a standstill, sitting in silence with the dark stretch of road before me and the black of the night on all other sides. I tried to collect myself, to come to some kind of plan, some way of getting out of the repetition. I rolled the cab slowly forward and repeated the same sequence another 3 times, my panic increasing with every try. Was this death? I wondered. Did I die at the wheel, from a heart attack or crash into some other vehicle, killed instantly? Perhaps this was hell, or purgatory, some limbo where you are damned to repeat the moment of your death over and over again for all eternity, trapped like a firefly sealed inside a jar. Perhaps the old woman was death, the grim reaper sent to watch as I slipped from the mortal plane and into whatever this awful forever was going to be. I tried reversing, sending the cab backward up the highway until I hit the trees, but found after a certain point I felt, despite the direction, as if I was still going forwards. In desperation, I cried and tried again and again to speed through and out of the loop. I tried veering off the highway, but was kept by some invisible force always facing forward, doomed to repeat over and over the same hideous loop. At one point, I decided to stop and wait, to remain still until the sun rose and someone, some other driver or some other soul came along the road to meet me, to help me. The sun never rose. I waited for hours, perhaps a whole day, but the darkness still remained. Eventually, though, it dawned on me. There was someone else, another soul, someone to speak to and ask for help. This time, I thought, I will speak to the old woman. The doors would not open, they seemed to be sealed shut, but if they did, if they moved just an inch, I would let that woman in, rules be damned, and would take her wherever she wanted to go. I would pick her up and help her. Speeding toward the end, I saw the start again, the 2 white trees, the old wreck of a car, but no old woman. Up ahead, just beyond the horizon, I saw the sun beginning to rise. I tried the door of the cab and found that it opened easily. I pulled the cab to the side of the road, stepped down to the tarmac and ran, leaving the truck where it was. I don't know who that woman was, how the physics of my experience worked, or how I eventually got out. Perhaps it was the choice, the decision to pick the woman up, to make the right choice and offer help. Maybe. But if so, why did she not accept? If she needed to get somewhere, why did she not wait for me to eventually pick her up? I said at the start that I will never drive that highway again. Some do not have the choice. In the 2 years since that night, 7 long-distance truckers, all of whom would have passed the start of Highway 88, have disappeared without trace. They all remain missing. I can only hope that they too eventually decide to pick the woman up and give her the lift she desires. If not, I fear they will be trapped, doomed to repeat the same circuit, past the 2 white trees, the wrecked-out car and the woman, not to mention the old red truck I left by the side of the road, a truck that as far as I know is still there to this day. I haven't checked. I'm not going back.